there.
Okay.
So we're back today with Dave Sprau, and we're going to talk some more about Dave Sprau's biography. Dave, it's good to be back with you again on a beautiful rainy fall day here in the Puget Sound.
Well, thank you, Jonathan. It's nice to be up and around today.
Yeah, you know.
I think I'm prepared for all of your questions.
Well, we're talking about your past, and you recall it quite well. And so, you know, I went back and was watching our previous episode, which I thought was so entertaining. And we ended up talking about your early years and then how these folks helped you get interested in railroading, how you became a railroader. And when we last saw you chronologically, you were sleeping in a section car in Easton.
Well, it was an outfit car. It was an old box car that had been refurbished and made into living quarters. It wasn't all that bad, but although it was certainly no thing of beauty. But,
So then, did it have a shower or anything?
oh yeah, it had a bathroom and it had a.
So how did you get hot water?
It had water and a little, 10-gallon hot water heater. Well, no, it was bigger than that because there was enough there for a shower, as I recall. So it must have been a small 110-volt water heater, probably originally designed for a trailer or something. The NP put that thing together.
Like a travel trailer sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then you just modified it and put it in. So it had 110, it had power to it and stuff like that. So that would have been right across the street from where you were going to high school.
Well, right catty corner. It was down there by the old signal maintainer's house.
Okay.
It was it was along with several others on a set of tracks that didn't go anywhere. The NP, when they set that up for the roundhouse foreman, they laid a track and shoved a couple of outfit cars in there, one for the foreman and one for his laborer and another one for tools, and then they disconnected the switch and left those cars sitting there by themselves. The spot where the cars used to be, of course, is still there, and I could point it out, but it was down there by the signal maintainer's house that was demolished about 20 years ago.
So that would have been west of the NP depot.
West of the depot, yeah.
West of the depot on the same side of the track?
On the same side of the track, and just before you would have, remember that old highway bridge that used to cross the highway at the west end of town? It was just before you got to that thing.
Oh, okay, right in there. So then one question that when I watched our last episode, one question that came to mind is, and you were talking about how busy you would be as the telegrapher at Easton and running the CTC and working with the dispatcher and doing all these things. Did you ever have time to do your high school homework?
Homework? Hell no, I didn't do any homework.
Oh. So,
I never did homework, even when I was in school in Monroe. If I couldn't get it done in class, I didn't do it.
Oh, okay. But you were able to get it done in class, so it wasn't an issue.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yeah, my grades weren't all that bad. It wasn't straight A, but it wasn't a failing grade either.
So it wasn't just all C's. You were kind of like a B plus student or something.
Between C plus and B plus, yeah, somewhere in there.
All right. What subjects did you like in high school?
Oh, English literature and some of the math, not all of it. In grade school, I liked recess most of all. I probably shouldn't admit this in a personal interview, but I never cared too much for school.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not going to tell me now, when were you going to tell me? You mean, let's just get it out.
Yeah, I mean, it all depended on a lot of things, but school was never my favorite activity of the day.
Yeah. So, in those high school years, things, in young people start changing. And one of the things that happens is, we start discovering, for example, the opposite sex.
Mm-hmm.
Now, did you have a girlfriend in high school?
A little bit of the time I did, but
Did you?
most of the time I just had crushes on girls. And most of the time, I really wouldn't have had time for those things anyway. So, I would have needed to, I guess I would have needed to fantasize, and I was too much of a realist to do very much of that.
Okay.
But, you know, I guess,
Okay.
you know, I didn't seriously get into girlfriend type stuff until I was out of school.
Oh, well, we'll come to that.
And then not always real seriously, sometimes, but not always.
Okay. Okay. So then how long did you live in that section car in Easton, and what happened from there, and how did that change?
In the outfit car.
Sorry, outfit car.
I lived in that for a year.
Hmm. Okay, then what?
Well, when I graduated from high school in May or late May of 1961, I had been offered a transfer into the relay division of the Northern Pacific. They actually came to me and asked me if I would care to come into Seattle and transfer into the relay division and work in the Seattle relay office, which was considered a promotion. It really wasn't a promotion, it was just a lateral transfer, but it was into an office where they did some pretty important work. It was communications in those days, in the days before widespread use of the telephone, when a lot of stuff was still being done by telegraph and teletype, and you had to kind of be a competent telegrapher and teletype operator in order to work in there. And so I was offered that opportunity, and I went in there and did that during the months of June and July. And then, surprise, in August they tell me, because I'm on their extra board, that I need to go to Livingston and work there, because my services were needed in Livingston, Montana. So off to Livingston I go.
As a telegrapher.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, working right there in the beautiful depot in downtown Livingston?
Yeah, right in the telegraph office.
Okay.
I worked the day shift on a train order job, which normally a lot of the relay offices didn't have. They just had communications jobs with telegraph and teletype and didn't have any interaction with the dispatcher. But at Livingston you did, and I worked the day shift on the train order job, working with the Missoula dispatcher for trains west and the Glendive dispatcher for trains east. And right at that time, the NP was installing CTC between Livingston and Laurel, and all the CTC people, including, including A.J. Hendry, the head of the signal department in St. Paul, they were all there crawling like ants all over everything while this project went in. So I got to meet A.J. Hendry, and he'd come in the telegraph office and visit with me and stuff. Very, very nice guy, very interesting.
And in high rank, what was his position with the railroad?
He was, we would have to look it up in the phone book, but he was the top guy in the signal department.
Oh, okay.
You'd have to look it up to get his title. But
no, but that gives us,
yeah,
the audience, a general idea of his position with the organization then. So then, now, if you were on the extra board and they sent you to Livingston, Montana, and you're working the day shift, was that because that seemed like a kind of a plum job.
It was.
How did a kid like you beat all these people on the seniority chart to be able to work the day?
They didn't want it. A lot of them didn't have much experience with train orders, because normally the relay division didn't do a lot of that type of work. So about half of them didn't have much experience with train orders. And those who didn't want to work the job, because the day dispatcher in Missoula was a cranky old guy by the name of Phil Colder, and he was nasty.
Oh, that's right.
He was a very unpleasant, nasty person, although I'm told that in person he was just the epitome of pleasantry.
I thought you won him over at some point, didn't you?
Well, I didn't win him over, but I got him off my back.
Yeah. Now, how did you do that?
Well, one day a lightning storm suddenly came up, and a bolt of lightning and a clap of thunder, and all the phones went out. All that was left was a telegraph wire. And he had been treating me over the phone like he treated most everybody else. I think he figured I was just some dummy, which I probably was to some extent.
Okay.
But I could telegraph. So he calls me on the wire, and he gives me a big long spiel on the wire. I still remember it. I think it was almost like it was intended to derail me. It was like, well, what about those two extras that are called there? Have you heard anything about when they'll be ready to go? And do you know what size train they are? A whole bunch of stuff all at once, as fast as he could tap it out. And I just replied. I answered all of his questions. Just replied in Morse code.
In
Yeah.
Morse code at 25 words a minute? Were you up to 25 words a
Oh
minute
yeah.
by that
Yeah. Oh
point?
yeah. Yeah. I was.
Oh, yeah.
I
Okay,
was
good.
as fast as anybody else around there.
Well, there you go.
And I just replied. And there was this silence over the wire. And he came back and said, okay. And I think he maybe gave me a okay to clear up one of the trains or something with a clearance. There was very little said after that. And when the phones came back about an hour later, and ever after that, he was courteous. And I wouldn't say he was pleasant, but he wasn't, he didn't smart off to me anymore. He didn't get sarcastic. He didn't have a nasty tone in his voice or anything. He was...
Because you'd proved your mettle by the ability to tap out 25 words a minute.
Well, by being able to answer his questions, yeah.
Yeah.
I think he was looking forward to being able to say, to be able to cuss and swear and throw things around the office and say they got the dumbbell at Livingston that can't telegraph, and now the phones are out and everything's AFU, and what am I going to do? And, just go on a rant and rave, and he wasn't able to do it. But I think at the same time he realized, well, I guess maybe some of these people do know how to do things that, after all.
Well, and, not to wish ill will on his own railroad, he was able to figure out what was going on and keep trains moving.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know?
I don't consider Phil to be a poor dispatcher. I think he probably was, looking back. I don't have the ability to judge because I hadn't been a dispatcher as yet, but I think he was probably okay. But he was just an awful, awful, nasty, unpleasant man. He wasn't happy unless he had the women telegraphers in tears. And until he had frightened all the new young guys to death, and be almost afraid to answer the phone. And I think that was why you asked me how I landed the job. I think it was because nobody wanted to
Work with him.
work with him. Yeah.
Now, Dave, I've got to ask you this question, facetiously, of course, is that was not a role model for you later on when then you became a dispatcher, is it? I've heard, we've joked about this off camera.
No, not really. I had other unpleasant dispatchers from whom I learned how to be obtuse, let's say. Not Phil. Phil could be nasty. He could be nasty and just personally insulting, and
intimidating, and his whole mentality is to create sort of a I'm okay, you're not okay relationship.
That's right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Understood.
I worked with other people that were a poor second to Phil as far as being like that, but any ability to be to be short with the help I learned from them and not from him.
Okay. So then you came, I just want to try to make sure I kind of have the box correct here. You came from the relay office in Seattle, and then went to the relay office in Livingston, but then worked as a telegrapher in the depot.
That's correct.
Okay. And what years were those?
Well, that was 1961, in the summer and the fall. And during September of 1961, this was vacation relief, and I worked for a month, I think it was, on that day job, and then I worked on some of the night jobs at Livingston that had nothing to do with the train orders, teletype jobs and Morse telegraph jobs. And then all of a sudden the vacations were over, and I think some guy who had been in St. Paul ran out of work there and bumped me out of Livingston off the extra board.
Oh, okay.
And so they released me back to the Tacoma Division, and I went back to Easton that fall. And I worked at Easton again from about late September until I think January, February, March of the following year, 1962, at which time I voluntarily went on the extra board on the Tacoma Division, and I worked all over the division on telegraph jobs.
So what were some of the places, when you say all over the division, where are those places?
Well, Yakima Yard, Yakima Depot, Ellensburg, Cle Elum, Canasket, Auburn Yard, Auburn Depot, Kent, Spokane Street Tower in Seattle, Reservation, the relay office in Tacoma, WR telegraph office. It wasn't really a relay office, but it did the same kind of work. And then I worked at Snohomish and Redmond, Washington, and Everett, Washington, Cedar Woolley, Arlington. I'm probably forgetting something, but I still had my relay division seniority. And they would call me in for maybe a week at a time.
Back to the relay office?
Back to the relay office, either in Seattle or a couple times in Spokane.
Okay.
And
so how was the work in the relay offices? You said that they did a lot of the same things in Tacoma, but it wasn't the same animal. So how are they the same? How are they different?
well, the original Seattle division had its offices in Seattle, dispatchers in the relay office in the old freight house, which is long demolished. It was right across King Street from FX McRory's, which is probably gone by now too. But anyway, for some reason, Tacoma never had been part of the relay division. And when the division headquarters were moved during the Depression from Seattle to Tacoma, they left the relay office in Seattle, because there still were some general office people, including the general manager in Seattle. And they just kind of built up this office in Tacoma in Union Station using local Tacoma division people to do that type of work, and they wouldn't let it into the relay office. They kind of had the same arrangement at Billings, Montana, where they had an office that was doing that type of work, but the communications department wouldn't let it into the relay office. I don't know if this, I was always told back in those days it was kind of an elitist thing being done by the communications division in St. Paul. And knowing some of the people in that department, I find that believable, but I also find it a little hard to believe. You know, I just don't know. To this day, I'm not sure.
So the relay office or the communications department had the upper hand with this stuff?
The communications department had the upper hand with that. They were in control of those relay offices.
Okay, all right, okay.
They were headquartered in St. Paul.
So you rattled off a lot of different locations, and you know, for the different places that you worked on the NP Extra board, what were some of the places that you liked and some of the places you didn't like?
Well, I was in over my head on station work. I didn't mention Renton and Snoqualmie. I worked there when they were NP agencies. And if it hadn't been for a clerk at Renton, Louise McChesney, who helped me with the station work, I would have sank beneath the waves. And at Redmond, the agent was a lovely elderly lady. She was number 1 on the seniority list, or number 2, Alma Floberg. She kind of had the station accounts in not the best shape, and when I came along, I put the finishing touches to it because I didn't have the capability of straightening out anything, and I made it worse. And the auditor had to come in and straighten it out, and he gave me a little lecture about staying on top of things. So then they sent me to Snoqualmie, which for sheer load was much worse than Renton. And at Snoqualmie, I burned the midnight oil a little bit and really stayed on top of things and came out okay on that one. And I had a little help from the Milwaukee agent at Snoqualmie, Warren Childers. He'd been an old friend. And if I get into a problem with something like transit billing or something, I'd go over to him and he'd help me out with this stuff. But anyway, to answer your question, I didn't like station agent work. And some of the stations that I did work at where there wasn't any of that work, like the NP station at Everett under the Hewitt Avenue trestle, that was a fun job. I liked that. And I liked Auburn Yard, and I liked Auburn Depot. I sold tickets there along with the telegraph duties and train order jobs. And I kind of liked working with people as long as the people didn't become difficult.
Wasn't that true in every instance?
Yeah, I suppose so.
You know,
I suppose so.
So then when we talk about station agent work, what were some of the different tasks and duties, and what was it that was so annoying about it? Just the volume?
Well, you had to know how to use freight tariffs to look up shipping rates of different kinds of merchandise to different places across the United States, and I was not good at that. I usually had to have help or would ask somebody for help with that to get those rates because you had to get them right. You don't want to collect the wrong amount of money. Fortunately, I never got into any money problems with anything. I was smart enough to avoid that, but not smart enough to avoid maybe a lot of hassle trying to get things right. And besides that, that kind of work was just boring to me. I just didn't.
It was like clerk work a little bit, isn't it? Wouldn't that be like a clerk's job?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you liked the action. You didn't like the paperwork.
I didn't like the paperwork except for train order and teletype work. That kind of stuff with paperwork was okay with me.
But
fine with
then
that.
one of the other elements of that then is selling tickets and balancing a till and doing all that. Now, how did that go over for you?
That was okay. I mean, I could do math, so balancing the till was no problem. And passenger rates were much easier to look up than freight rates. And usually we had a cheat sheet on that stuff anyway. Everybody'd come in, they'd either want to go to, Atlanta or New Orleans or Chicago or New York or someplace, and we had we knew what the rates were for that.
So you would quote them from wherever all the way to New Orleans then, and you collect the entire tariff for the whole thing, and then
Yeah.
the railroad would remit what part of it went to the Illinois Central to them.
That is correct.
Okay.
I remember one day a lady came into Auburn and she wanted to catch the train that very afternoon and she wanted to go to High Point, North Carolina.
Oh.
Well, it's like, where is that? And so I immediately got the tariffs out and I couldn't find High Point, but I found some other spot. And she wanted to know how much the ticket would be. And I said, well, I quoted some other spot in North Carolina that I could find. And I said, the rate is however much, probably in those days, probably about $85 one way. And I said, okay. And she says, yeah, that's fine. So then I called up the rate desk in Seattle in the passenger traffic department and told them, hey, I got to get a ticket made out right away. And I don't have time to look through this stuff because I'm not too good at it. And I don't even know if I have the right tariffs. What's the rate from Auburn, Washington for one adult to High Point, North Carolina? And what's the routing? And they just gave it to me.
Oh. Were you close? Did you have a...
Right to the penny.
Did you?
It was the same as it was to this other larger city.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
just pure luck. But yeah, right to the penny.
Yeah, good deal.
And so I made the ticket out and got her on the train. She was happy. But normally people didn't in those days come in and want to leave on the same day for some far distant point because it involved sometimes telegraphing and getting seat reservations and all sorts of things. And I can remember several occasions where I just told people, here, I'm selling you a ticket to St. Paul. When you get to St. Paul, you go to the Union Depot to the ticket desk. And I'm going to wire ahead for them to have this stuff for you, but I don't have time to look it up now. Train's going to be here in an hour. It's going to, I'm going to have to do telegraphing, get messages back in order to line this up now, and there isn't time. So here you go, and I'm telegraphing all the information on you to the ticket agent in St. Paul, and you can meet up with him in 3 days, and he'll have your stuff and
figure it all out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Because ticketing would have to come second to a train order.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I can remember a few times when I was in the middle of selling somebody a ticket, and the dispatcher would ring, and I'd have to leave them. And it's kind of, they don't understand this stuff, although I managed, and we all did, to be polite enough to explain to them this is communications work involving a train movement in the next 20 minutes. I got to take care of it. I'll get back to you
With the ticket thing, as soon as I get this train thing taken care of.
You could tell people were irritated by it, but they were indulgent.
Well, I mean, they didn't really have much of a choice.
No, they didn't.
But then it was always seniority. I mean, we didn't hire people as ticketing people based on their personality or any kind of a, assessment to figure out if you were really customer centric or not. So you could get some cranky people selling tickets and uncranky people selling tickets.
I think in those days people were more uncranky. They realized that, you didn't just pick up the phone in those days and call these places and do these things. You were incommunicado for a lot of places. You had to make long distance telephoning was not a popular item in those days. It wasn't done a whole lot, and so a lot of this was done with telegrams.
Or teletype or not?
Well, teletype by that time. Most of the telegraph work for long distance Most of the telegraph work for long distance communications was being done by teletype rather than Morse telegraph in those days. Telegraph had kind of been relegated to local service to the local stations, like from Seattle to, for example, Snohomish or Cle Elum or,
Or the Olympic Peninsula, Grays Harbor.
well, Grays Harbor, yes. The Olympic Peninsula, I think the Milwaukee was doing that all by long distance phone in those days.
Milwaukee was doing it by phone, but don't I recall from our previous conversations that Hoquiam and Aberdeen were some of the last places to get rid of Morse code?
Yeah, Hoquiam and Aberdeen were.
Yeah. Now, so you worked the extra board, worked all these different places, but then you ended up kind of working out on the Grays Harbor line, right?
I never worked anywhere on the Grays Harbor line. I think I bid in an operator's job at Elma one time, and then before I ever worked it, bid in something else. But I was a dispatcher on the line a lot. And of course, the Grays Harbor line is a piece of cake. I mean, it's just a straight gut from Centralia to Hoquiam and on to Moclips with a couple of branches out of Aberdeen. Not hard to understand.
Okay, all right.
And branches out of Elma, of course, up to Bangor and Bremerton.
Right.
Again, not hard to understand.
No, not hard to understand. So then you bounced around on the extra board, and you liked the places where you could be a telegrapher, and you didn't like the places where you ended up doing too much of that, trying to figure out how much to charge for this load of wood chips across the country.
That is 100% correct.
100% correct. And how long did you stay on the extra board?
Well, I finally got a little bit tired of it, and I bid in a relief job that worked 2 days at Canasket, 1 day at Leicester, and 2 days at Auburn Yard. And I worked that job for about a year or so.
Now, were you still driving the Oldsmobile at this point?
Oh, no. I wrecked the Oldsmobile in, early in 1960 and went out and traded it in or sold it. I think I sold it to somebody. No, I traded it in. I didn't really wreck it. I just had a couple of fender benders with it, and it was a gas hog. I traded it in and bought a Chevrolet Corvair.
A Chevrolet, that's right. How long did you drive the Corvair?
Oh, I drove it for about a year or two, and then I bought another one and drove that one for a year or two. They were good on gas, and they were really good in icy, snowy weather. And I didn't have to chain up or anything. I could drive over Snoqualmie Pass when chains were required without chains and never slip a wheel.
Wasn't that the engine was in sort of an interesting...
Like a Volkswagen. It was
like a Volkswagen. It was a rear engine vehicle. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. And that's why they had pretty good traction then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, okay.
A lot of people didn't like them, but it was a very utilitarian car for me, almost like a Jeep. I can remember taking a Corvair up on Old Stampede Pass and driving across Old Stampede Pass over the top and onto some of those side roads. And again, never slip a wheel and never get into any kind of trouble with it. An old prospector that I knew from Death Valley said that the Model T Ford replaced the Burro for these old prospectors because, again, it would take you anywhere out in the desert or anywhere up in the mountains, and he said it replaced the Burro. Well, as far as I was concerned, the Corvair sort of replaced a Jeep.
Okay.
I don't think it could go everywhere a Jeep could go, but if you didn't expect too much of it, it wouldn't let you down either. It'd take you just about, well, it took me over Stampede Pass in very, very bad weather many times.
Oh, okay, that's right.
With no problem.
So 2 days at Canasket, 2 days at Auburn Yard, and 1 day at Leicester?
Mm-hmm.
How'd you like Leicester?
Oh, I thought Leicester was great. I worked there other times. I had worked there off the extra board a couple of times and got sent over there a couple of times in emergencies on my days off. And I bid in the graveyard shift there once in the 60s. Went up there and worked graveyard, and this just happened to be in the wintertime. That place was dead in the wintertime. And I thought to myself, this is pretty bad. I got to get out of here. This is, I'll go stir crazy. So there was always a job on the bulletin somewhere. I bid in some other job and got out of there.
I mean, just because it was just so. But Leicester was like a little Northern Pacific Company town, kind of unto itself, right?
Oh yeah.
And the only way in was still to drive over Stampede Pass and in that way, or was there a road from the west side?
In the summertime, over Stampede Pass was the best way. In the wintertime, when that was closed, the Seattle and Tacoma watersheds would open their roads up to Leicester people. They didn't like having to do it. They resisted it, but somehow or another they had to do it, and they did it. But they were not nice people. They were
Similar to the experience, that we Milwaukee folks had at Cedar Falls.
very similar.
Yeah, because
Very
they
similar.
were, I can remember Alan talking about, getting yelled at as an employee on duty by a municipal employee about, being on the property, and it's like, I work here,
Yeah. Oh yeah, very
So,
similar.
yeah.
Very similar.
Yeah.
And we reacted in kind. We probably, it's like if a dog is barking at you, and you antagonize him, he's gonna probably bark harder or bite you. And so I think we antagonized some of those watershed people and made them even meaner. But
Now,
yeah, there was a very, very strained relationship
between the parties.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, there's nothing but foundations in Leicester anymore.
yeah, the watershed people won. Tacoma
Yeah, they just flattened that thing right out.
yeah.
So did you ever work with a young Jack Christensen back in those days? Did you ever bump into Jack?
Well, he's scared the hell out of me one day at Easton. He'll deny this, of course, but he was an extra board engineer at the time, and he just happened to catch number 600, which is one of their more important freight trains.
Right.
And he went through Easton a little bit fast, and I was supposed to hand up orders, and I did, but he was going a little faster than he should have been going. And
Because you're standing right next to the train with that hoop.
yeah, and I'm used to them going past at about 20, and I think he went past at about 40
Which direction?
east.
Oh, okay. So he's trying to make the hill.
Well, no, he's going
Oh,
going east.
He's going east. So he's downhill.
down through the double track switch into the single track and towards Yakima.
Yeah. Okay.
Now he wasn't. Let's make this clear. Jack was very conscientious, capable man. He wasn't exceeding the speed limit. Well, maybe 5 miles an hour. He wasn't doing anything reckless.
No.
He was just doing something that he was able to do that the other engineers didn't do because they probably didn't want to scare the pants off the operator. They were all probably going a little artificially slow. He might have been going a little artificially fast, but not recklessly so. But
No.
I had never had anybody go by me at that speed before when handing up orders. And I remember I said to Jim Fredrickson when I got in the depot, I said, who was that? Who was that engineer? I should have known. I had the registered soup ticket, but I basically was asking, who is this guy? And he says, well, that's Jack Christensen. He's, one of our better engineers. And I said, well, he sure scared the hell out of me. And there was nothing more said because I didn't want to be, you couldn't have made a case for turning the guy in besides that being a really rotten thing to do. He wasn't going that fast.
No, he wasn't going
as fast as he was going, as fast as he legally could, and maybe a little bit more, but impossible to prove. And but it scared me. That's on me, not on him.
Okay. So that was the first time you remember bumping into him?
Oh yeah. That's the first time I remember bumping into him. And then after that, I worked around Everett and Auburn, and he was on the Everett time freight, and nice guy,
Oh,
He'd come in the office and we'd talk and stuff. I never held that incident at Easton against him.
Okay.
I just remembered it. If something scares you, you usually remember it.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Now, so this was, at what point in your career at Easton did this occur? Was this early on?
Oh yeah, very early on.
Okay, and then Jim Fredrickson was the dispatcher in Tacoma, then, who you were reporting to.
He was the night dispatcher in Tacoma. So yeah, this would have been between when I first went there in 1960 and 61 when I left there to go into the relay division. It was sometime very early in my career.
Okay, all right. So then you bumped into that relief job, and you were working at Leicester, working the Auburn Yard. You liked the Auburn Yard.
Yeah, I did.
No difference between Auburn Yard and Auburn Depot. How's the work differentiate?
Well, Auburn Yard was a yard office where freight train crews came and went, came on duty and went off duty, and where you used teletype and other communications methods to receive and send information about the in other words, lists of what's in freight trains and copied train orders and for freight trains to leave town. But you didn't interact with the public at all. The public never came there. All of your interaction was with other railroad employees. And at Auburn Depot, that was the depot for the town. That's where the public came and picked up their express, and at night could send Western Union telegrams, and could buy railroad tickets, and would...
At night? Not during, all day, right?
Well, during the daytime, Western Union had their own office uptown.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see what you're saying. Just for
But they
that
would
was
close it at
referencing.
night, and then all the business would come to us at the depot. Yeah, and Kent was the same way. They had their own office uptown, but at night the telegraphers in the depot took care of the Western Union business for the city.
So then, if I'm eastbound out of East Auburn, do I go to the Auburn Depot and buy my ticket and then go
Yeah.
up to East Auburn to wait to get on the train?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because there was no real depot, or was there any kind of depot in East Auburn or not?
No, there was a shelter building.
Shelter building for passengers.
Yeah, in the early days there was a station there manned by a telegrapher, and that's a good question. I don't remember if I wouldn't remember, it was before my time, but I don't know if he sold tickets or not. I think he probably did, at least local tickets. But I would imagine that Auburn Depot downtown pretty much always sold the high revenue long distance tickets. Now that's a guess on my part, but I think it's an educated guess. But how well I remember how many times we would explain this to people. They'd come in to buy their tickets. And of course the depot was located right on West Main Street.
Right.
And I would have to tell them, or we would have to tell them, no, you don't catch the train here. You catch it at East Auburn, West Main, the street right out here. And I think it was J Street or K Street. You just get on this street and start heading east until you get to J Street, and then hang a right and you go down, and the street ends at the tracks, and there's a
platform.
There's a platform, and they were good about it. People understood.
So would that would have, which trains would have stopped at East Auburn?
All of the east and west trains going toward Yakima, to or from Yakima, they were too long to stop. If they stopped at the Auburn Depot, they would block the whole town.
That's why they did it.
Yeah, they had West Main Street blocked, and if they were long enough, they'd have the next street down towards Seattle blocked, and it was just bad. I don't know how the Milwaukee did it. Their depot was in roughly the same spot, a little,
But a station stop at Auburn, you've got a lot of passengers, you got a lot of you could be there for a few minutes, right?
Yeah, right.
How long would a stop take?
It involved a transfer from Tacoma in the early days by train, and later years by bus. But yeah, it involved transferring a lot of stuff from Tacoma and moving loading and unloading a lot of mail and some express and baggage and all of that. So a 10-minute stop was not unusual. The North Coast Limited we would do in 5 minutes, but these other trains that carried a lot of mail and express, 10 minutes, maybe 15 if there was a lot of it.
Yeah.
And that's too long to block the West Main crossing in Auburn.
No, that would be a problem, all right. And then the connecting trains, at one time there was a connecting train that Jack and Max King used to work on that would come up from Tacoma and spot people, that were going east, and then bring the westbound people back to Tacoma. But how long did that last, and when did that turn into a bus?
It turned into a bus before my time, and I don't have the year at my fingertips, but I would roughly say 1954.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, they called it the stub, is what they call those trains. They were just a little passenger train that ran between Tacoma and Auburn and connected, as the bus later did, with every train that was going east or west through East Auburn.
Okay.
And it could make its connection by going up the south leg of the Y off the main line at Auburn. So that didn't interfere with any of the street crossings. And then when they got that all done, they could make a really quick move, backing the train down the west leg, and yeah, they'd block West Main Street just for a second while they made that move, and then away they'd go.
Okay, so then they would pull eastbound into East Auburn, do whatever they needed to do, and then when they headed back to Tacoma, they would just back out the north leg of the Y and then take off for town again.
That's correct.
Oh, that makes, yeah, yeah. Okay, so there's no reason to turn till you have to go.
That's right.
Okay, that makes sense. So how long did you work there?
You mean at Auburn Depot?
Well, and on that relief job, the 221.
Well, I think a couple of years off and on.
And
Well,
that-
actually longer than that, because I went in the dispatcher's office in 1964, and I was on that relief job at the time, I believe. No, I was on a different relief job. It worked one or 2 days at Auburn Yard, 1 or 2 days at Auburn Depot, and 1 day at Spokane Street Tower in Seattle.
Oh, okay.
And I gave that job up when I went in the dispatcher's office. I think I bid in a job at Easton and worked, again at Easton. Easton was a very handy place to hide out.
How
And
so?
not to be too confusing here, but I worked that Canasket Lester job also. I would move from one job to another. These jobs would come up for bid and for bulletin, and I would move around a lot. When I first went in the dispatcher's office, you don't get a dispatcher's job. You get to be on their extra board, so you still have to work as an operator a lot of the time, and I did. And I was working that Canasket Lester Auburn relief job in 1968 when 2 dispatchers died on the same weekend, and I got a permanent dispatcher's job as a result.
Tom Melvin
Tom Melvin,
and
Ray Smith.
now we haven't talked much about Ray. Tell me a little bit about him.
Well, Ray was an old-time dispatcher. He'd been around a lot of years. I wish that I had taken more time to talk to him, because he was a really interesting old guy. Now, we're digressing from railroading. Well, no, we're not.
No, we're not.
But he would tell me things like that he had been the agent at Malone
Malone.
down by near Elma.
Oh, okay, okay.
He also had been the agent at Carbonado. Yeah,
Okay.
Carbonado.
Yeah, yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
And he told a few other stories, and I remember one story he told was that he was the agent at Carbonado, and a guy came in with a herd of sheep. I don't think they brought the sheep in the depot, but
Well, I
this
hope not.
smelly sheep herder comes
Oh,
in
yeah.
the depot at Carbonado and wanted, excuse me, he wanted a stock car, and not right then, he wanted it in a couple days
Yeah.
to load these sheep up and ship them to Wingate. Now, Wingate is on the Crocker branch.
Yeah.
Wingate is over the hill on the other side of the river below Carbonado, within about a mile of Carbonado, but on a completely different line. He wanted to ship all these sheep to Wingate, which was probably involved about 40 miles of rail travel just to go 1 mile.
As the crow flew.
Yeah, right. All you do is go over the bank there at Carbonado down to the river, cross the river, and you're pretty much in Wingate. Well, so Ray, a young man at the time, he asked this guy, well, why don't you just herd him over there? He said, oh, they won't cross the river.
Oh, well,
And
no.
Ray said, well, that's ridiculous. The river's low. They won't cross it. I've tried it. It doesn't work. This is how we do it. I need a stock car. So Ray says, he got the stock car. The guy loaded the sheep all up, and paid a fancy price, shipped them to Wingate, unloaded them, and there you are. You're in Wingate now, looking up the hill, and there's Carbonado.
There you go.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about working at Spokane Street. That must have been a busy place back in the day. The south end of Stacy Street, you had all the Harbor Island traffic. Tell me a little bit about what it was like there.
Can we cut for a second and
Sure.
go back? Let me tell you about Ray as a dispatcher.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ray eventually became a train dispatcher, and when I knew him, he was one of the night chief dispatchers. He was no longer a tick dispatcher, but the poor guy, he was a worrywart. He worried about everything. He just dithered and worried and was very, very conscientious about everything. Everything had to be done right. And he got very upset if things weren't going right. And he would worry, even things when they were going right, about what might go wrong.
Oh, one of those sort of type A kind of people.
Yeah, and I even asked one of the other older dispatchers that had known him for many years, I says, my God, what was he like on a trick job? And, you know, I'm handling train orders. And he said, oh, he was meticulous. He would issue train orders continually, covering every possible contingency. He would just dither, and he'd put out weights on trains all the way from Yakima to East Auburn, when maybe just one or two weights at some central point was all that he really needed to do to move the traffic that he had. But he'd put out these waiting times so that he had them available if he needed them later, and he'd just worry himself. And well, the poor old guy, high blood pressure,
Yeah.
died of a stroke at 63 years old.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Right. Not at work.
No, he took ill at work, wasn't feeling well, went home, went up to the NP hospital, and died the next day. So
Back when we had the NP hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, wow. And Tom Melvin now, and E.T. Tom Melvin, what happened to him?
Well, Tom had been in World War II, and I think he'd been in the Philippines or in some very disagreeable places.
Yeah, my uncle was there.
Yeah, he didn't do anything like the Bataan Death March, but he picked up some kind of jungle fever that stayed with him, I think. And I think it affected his heart. And Ray Smith went up to the NP hospital on a Thursday, and on Friday morning I was working graveyard shift on one of the other districts, and Tom Melvin was working third trick on the double track north. And he says to me, he says, look at here, and he pulled up his pants leg, and says his ankles had all swollen up.
Oh
And
my.
he says, my ankles are all swelled up. He says, oh, what do you suppose is wrong? And I says, well, I don't know. Well, you know, now I know that's congestive heart failure.
Exactly.
But I didn't know then. And I said, I think you ought to have a doctor look at that. And he says, yeah, I think I'll go up to the NP hospital and get a bed next to old Smitty up there. Well, he did go to the doctor, and the doctor did send him to the NP hospital that day. Smitty died the next day, and Tom died the day after in the NP hospital.
Wow. And so then they needed dispatchers all of a sudden.
Well, I was first out extra when, in other words, I was the senior extra dispatcher. Could glom onto all the work available when Smith took sick, and when he died, that gave me a regular job. And then when Tom Melvin died, that gave me a regular job, plus the guy behind me, Arnold McFarland, got a regular job too. And Arnold had been a dispatcher at that time for about 6 weeks.
How long had you been a dispatcher by this point in time?
About 4 years. But Arnold's brother, Charlie, who was a dispatcher on the Great Northern in Seattle, had just gotten a regular job, and it took him 20 years to land a regular job off the extra board as a dispatcher. Now, he had worked a little bit in Whitefish and other places, had a regular job for a little while, but poor Charlie basically was on the edge of the extra board for 20 years, and here's his little brother comes along and gets a permanent job in 6 weeks. And Charlie said, 6 weeks? It took me 20 years. And that was always kind of a joke. You know?
Well, yeah. I mean, that would, you would always at Thanksgiving be kind of giving the business to your brother over that one, wouldn't you?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. No, that's funny. So then, excuse me. How do you go from being a telegrapher to a dispatcher? What's the process, and how do you do it, and who do you have to know, and what do you need to do?
Well, I certainly hope you're asking how that was in 1964, because it's a little different now.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, in 1964 and in the years before that, and for quite a few years after that, if you were a telegrapher, you copied and a lot of train orders and cleared up a lot of trains on those orders and worked with a dispatcher a lot and unless you absolutely were not paying attention at all, you had a pretty good idea what that was all about. When you went into the dispatcher's office, it was a whole new world, but at least you did know something about those train orders, and probably without that, everybody would have sunk beneath the waves. You had to learn things about running times, and you had to learn things about what not to do with the train orders. You had to learn things like some engineers could do a little better than other engineers. I think now they're all about the same because they're under so many constraints. But in those days, some could do a little better. And some conductors could herd their brakemen and get work done really fast, and others weren't very good at it and maybe didn't have very good brakemen, and it would take a little longer to stop and do the same amount of work. You had to learn all these intricacies, because if you didn't know that, you don't have instant communication with these trains, and you have to anticipate this ahead of time and get this out in the train orders and make sure everybody keeps moving. So you have a lot to learn, and you have to learn it pretty fast. And then you have to become qualified on the territory. You know, it's, for example, I say that the Grays Harbor line is a piece of cake. Well, yeah, it is, but it's not if you don't know it. I had to get some maps out, and I had to get in my car and drive down there and look around, and you know, I had to do a little bit of that kind of homework. I didn't do homework in school, but I sure did on the job. You had to do things to familiarize yourself.
Well, yeah, where's gate?
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you know, how long is the siding at gate, and is there a grade there, and what if I stick a train here, what happens? And
exactly.
you know, so
and you multiply that by every station on the division, you got a lot to learn. And so you have to kind of make yourself some cheat sheets and cram it into a notebook and cram what you can up here and pay attention. Some guys didn't make it in the dispatcher's office. They gave it up or got kicked out because they just weren't getting it.
now Smitty, we were talking about him a minute ago, and you were talking about how he would, you know, that he would issue all of these weight orders and when he probably only needed one or two. I just want to come back to him for a second. But even though he was a little bit of a, maybe overmanaged the situation a bit, all of his trains, he kept the line fluid and stuff kept moving, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Because there are people that overthink this stuff and then trains never go anywhere. We can think of a couple people off camera
Oh, yeah.
that just, you know, they overthink it and then nothing moves.
Well, yeah. If you spend all your time making the trains wait while you plan what you're going to do, or make them wait while you're trying to do it, you're not a dispatcher. I mean, sorry, but that's the way it is. And don't misunderstand me. In my career as a dispatcher, I made plenty of mistakes. I got into trouble and served time for a lap order, and.
But nothing bad happened. What? Tell me about that in the instance. But nothing bad happened. So what happened?
Well, I was working I think it was the Mountain Mainline District, and they were remodeling the office, and they had moved my desk out in the middle of a different room in the building, and there were people working over me, sawing with hand saws, as sawdust coming down on my desk, and that's no excuse. But anyway, I was already discombobulated a little bit. And then we had a derailment. One of my trains derailed over around Ellensburg.
Which direction?
Oh, I don't remember. I think it was going east. I think he derailed in the canyon somewhere around Sprau or Umtanum.
Yeah.
So we were trying to get work trains called and stuff like that. And the Milwaukee operator at Raymond calls me on the city phone. The Mountain District handled the South Bend branch.
Oh, okay.
So
I was wondering how the Milwaukee got involved in a derailment in how do you say it?
Umtanum or Thrall or someplace.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of trying to set the scene. Here I am. I'm already busy. I wouldn't say I was over my head, but I was.
You had a lot going on at that particular moment.
I was an extra dispatcher at the time. I hadn't been in a job yet. I was working the job extra. And I get this phone call from Raymond on the Milwaukee at I was working the day shift, so this had to be before 4 p.m.
Right.
That their train that was on duty at 6 p.m., he needed the orders for their train to run back to Chehalis. And I was just too busy to mess with it. And I said, I can't deal with you right now. I got a derailment on the main line. Your train's not on duty for 2 hours. Call me back later. Bang, I hang up the phone and go back about my business. About 10 minutes later, one of the other dispatchers in the office comes in and he says, that Milwaukee operator, Raymond, called me back and he's going off duty at 4 o'clock.
So they've got to do something, otherwise the crew would have to copy the order.
Well, my answer was, okay, he might have to work a few minutes overtime before I can get to him, but I'll get to him in just a couple minutes. Tell him that. And so he went away, and about a minute later, 2 minutes later, he comes in carrying a telephone with a long cord, and he plops it down on my desk and he says, here's a Milwaukee operator, Raymond. Okay, so I picked the order up and I said, copy 3 and order number, and without looking back at the train order book at what I had done previously, I put out an order, engine Milwaukee,
whatever it was,
run extra, Dryad Junction to Chehalis Junction. Well, I should have said after 6:01 p.m. engine Milwaukee, run extra, because I had an NP train coming south, not over that exact same stretch of track, but using part of it earlier in the day.
Yeah.
That was annulled going south in their train orders at 6:01 p.m. This order is annulled at 6:01 p.m. So I needed to say after 6:01 p.m. I didn't say it. I just said run extra Dryad Junction to Chehalis Junction. Cleared up the train and thought no more of it. And a couple days later, one of the other dispatchers said to me, say, I think you got a lap out on the South Bend branch the other day. He says, because when the Milwaukee got into Chehalis that night and called me up, they said, hey, did you forget about the NP train that was going south? They had seen it on the other side of the river on their own track down around Raymond somewhere. It had come all the way south of Dryad Junction where the conflict would have started. But they noticed it over there and they thought, oh, I wonder how he got down there without us having some mention of him in our orders. So they kind of jokingly said, did you forget about your your NP train or something? And the dispatcher says, well, I don't think so. I think we, and he kind of hushed it up.
But then went back and looked.
Well, then he went back and looked and saw that I had, and so he told me about it.
Oh, so you found out from one of your coworkers.
Yeah.
Then what happened?
Well, about another day went by, and some of those crews started talking. I forget how, but
NP crews, Milwaukee crews?
Must have been Milwaukee crews, but the NP trainmaster picked up on it, and then the night chief dispatcher, John Ackley, who had been on duty, who had been my boss on the night that it happened, he got a hold of it and he went to the chief because he figured we got to tell this guy. He's going to find out. And he went to the chief dispatcher, and I'm told how the conversation went. He was very nice about it. John, a lot of people didn't care for John, but John was a good guy. And he more or less tried to protect me. He said, yeah, he says, Dave got a lap out down there. It was just it didn't amount to anything because the trains were miles and miles apart and there's no way they could have come together ever.
So it's more of a technical thing.
Yeah, and he forgot to say after,
thing.
Right, he forgot to say after 6:01 p.m. in the order, but the train wasn't on duty till 6:01. So, it's all technical. Well, anyway, the train master got a hold of it, and then the superintendent got a hold of it, and so they called an investigation, and they,
correctly,
right, and we went through the whole thing, and I was given 10 days suspension without pay, and that was the end of that. And I just figured, well, I got what I had coming.
Okay.
And
was that the only time?
Well, the only time I ever got caught. I did a doozy on the branch lines in down around Conrad, Montana when I was in Havre.
This would be in the BN days.
In BN days, yeah.
Well, we're here. Let's just talk about it.
Well, I kind of don't remember how I did it. It had to do with an engine change. These two trains were supposed to meet and change engines. And I slopped it over. I somehow got the engine change correct for one of the trains. Didn't have it correct for the other train. So technically I had a lap out on paper between an engine that really wasn't going to run it at all, but still with a train manned by a crew. And I remember the conductor on that train caught it just as the shifts were changing, and he said to the relief dispatcher, who was had just sat down and also had caught it, look at this, and about that time this conductor comes on the phone at Conrad or somewhere down there. Where in the hell did you get that guy? He says, referring to me.
Yeah. Okay.
And the third trick dispatcher, Howard Tibbetts, pretty good guy, said, I will talk to you about that later. I've got the operator at Conrad called out, or I'm gonna fix this. We'll talk about all of that later. Excuse me.
That's okay.
Getting a little hoarse. And I don't know how Howard handled it. He handled it with that conductor basically, shut up, and
Let's not make a big deal out of this when we don't need to.
that's right. That's basically how I think how he handled it. Nothing more was said about it, except a couple days later, I was working, and one of the road foremen of engines called the chief dispatcher on duty, Charlie Kegel, and started ragging on him about it. He'd heard about it. And Charlie basically told him the same thing. Shut up. I know what happened. You know it's all on paper. The guy screwed up and he knows it, and we've talked to him about it. And it won't happen again, and we don't want this going any further. There's no need for it.
We don't need to make a mountain out of a molehill
Yeah,
here.
but, this is not,
It's not something we can take lightly either.
well, no, this isn't dispatching. This is screwing up.
Yes.
And I did it. And, over a period of 30 years of dispatching, those are 2 serious infringements, let's say, on the rules. Breaking the rules. Doing stuff you're not supposed to do. Could be dangerous. Wasn't in this case, but it kind of shows momentary carelessness.
Well,
so there you are.
Providence shone upon you on both of those occasions.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And I kind of used that, without telling some of the people I was training, as examples of things to look out for.
Okay. Yep. So let's take a little time out